And what are some of the, let's call them unique challenges that you have to deal with when you work on a multi-billion-dollar project, especially in the geotechnical field?
Well, they're demanding, right? They take a lot of time. They're very demanding of staff. When you're, again, SoFi Stadium is an example, with $6 billion. They were trying to get it done by the Super Bowl in 2020. It ended up becoming 2021. So it is date, driven, like all projects. In this case, it was a several billion dollars riding on it. So
billion-dollar projects are a different beast altogether. They're massive undertakings that require precise planning, meticulous execution, and an immense amount of resources. The stakes are incredibly high and the pressure to deliver is straight up relentless. But what truly sets these projects apart is the sheer scale of the complexity that's involved with completing the project. Today, I'm thrilled to have on the show Michael Reeder, CEO and Principal Geotechnical Engineer of Group Delta Consultants, who's been instrumental in tackling some of California's most complex infrastructure projects, including the LAX Automated People Mover and the Gerald Desmond Bridge. We'll be talking about the unique challenges that are faced when building billion-dollar projects, from unexpected engineering challenges to budget overruns and regulatory hurdles, and how you can overcome these challenges. I'm your host, Jared Green, and I'm excited to be bringing you another episode of the Geotechnical Engineering Podcast. But before we get started, here's a quick word from our sponsor for today's episode, that being PPI, a Kaplan company.
PPI provides expert prep courses and study resources designed to help you pass the FE and PE exams the first time. PPI's live online courses include hours of lectures, problem-solving demonstrations, exam strategy sessions, office hours, and a passing guarantee. Check out PPI today at ppi2pass.com to see all the options available for FE and PE exam prep. Now let's dive into today's episode.
Mike, thank you for coming on the show. How are you feeling today?
Fantastic. I appreciate the invite, Jared. Good to see you again.
Excellent. Likewise. So let's just get right into it. So you're the CEO and Principal Geotechnical Engineer at Group Delta. Tell us a little bit more about your career journey and how you arrived to this position where you are today.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. Appreciate being on the show. So originally, I started as a mining engineer way back in the mid-'80s. This is a while back now at the University of Arizona. I always wanted to be in mines, mining engineering, what they called hard rock. In the mid-'80s, it was a really bad time in mining in this country. Price of copper and other things was way down. There was not a lot of mining jobs. So I transitioned to geotech. So came to LA, got my first job in geotechnical engineering in a small company here in Southern California where, you did your own lab testing, you ran your own maxes, you did your own field work, all that kind of stuff. It's actually really good training. I don't think there's a lot of companies that do that anymore. I'm sure there might be some smaller ones that do. So anyway, moved to Los Angeles, got into the geotech industry and kind of grew from there. Went to a bigger company after a few years that no longer exists called Schaefer-Dixon Associates. And then a few years into that, started a company with two partners and, eventually bought them out and then merged with what is now Group Delta. So that's a quick summary of how I got here. I was then the vice president and then became a CEO in 2008 at the beginning of the Great Recession.
Nothing like timing, right?
Yeah, that's right. It all worked out. That was all good.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. And then Group Delta, from what I understand, has maintained its independence while working on some of the most complex projects in California. How does your approach as an independent company differ from larger firms that have grown through acquisitions?
Yeah, great question. As you've seen, and I think the whole industry has seen, particularly in our area, but almost every one of our competitors has now been acquired by, large strategic companies, obviously like a Terracon, a lot of private equity. of very large companies. So we're one of the last independents. So, we like the hands-on approach. We're 100 people. We work on billion, 2 billion. I have my screensaver here is a $6 billion. That's SoFi Stadium, the most expensive building in the U.S. right next to the Newport Inglewood Fault. So, Group Delta is the name. We view ourselves a little bit like the Delta Force, meaning our people can do a lot of different things from the basic stuff all the way through the high-tech stuff. And so we try to accomplish a lot with a few people, a few engineers, a few geologists, and our staff get to experience all range of simple to complex projects, high seismic, liquefaction, high rises, deep excavation. And so we look for people that can do everything, not just sit at a computer, run, analyses. You have to do that, do high-end analysis, but you have to go in the field, drill it, see how it's built, go in the tunnel, go in the dewatered excavation, all of that stuff. So I think that's what makes us different, and maybe like an older traditional company, is that, our people can do the full range of services in a small company.
Got it. And what are some of the, let's call them unique challenges that you have to deal with when you work on a multi-billion-dollar project, especially in the geotechnical field?
Well, they're demanding, right? They take a lot of time. They're very demanding as staff. When you're, again, SoFi Stadium is an example, with $6 billion. They were trying to get it done by the Super Bowl in 2020. It ended up becoming 2021. So it is date, driven, like all projects. In this case, it was several billion dollars riding on it. So again, your people working on it, your managers have to commit everything they have to get all of the technical issues answered, when the project needs it. SoFi is 1,000 feet from the Newport Inglewood Fault. It has the largest MSE wall ever designed, which accommodates the bowl. It's 100 feet in the ground. That seismic design, the roof that you see is 1,500 foot span roof. It's the largest ground motion study ever done. So they're great things to brag about, Jared. Mm-hmm. But in the middle of it, it's mayhem. Your people are very smart and dedicated to giving the answer.
Excellent. And what are some of the leadership strategies that have been most effective for you when you talk about overcoming challenges when you're working on these complex projects?
I mean, really, it all comes to hiring the right people. Early on in my career, I read a lot of management books about how to organize a company, and should be a triangle or an inverted triangle or a matrix or a line or a flat or round or literally, Yeah. There's a pretty good book called Blitz Scaling, which more has to do with tech, but it talks about as you grow, you need different management skills. But at the end of the day, it's really, you need to hire the people that you need for the type of work you deliver, right? Nobody in our company can be pigeonholed. People have to be willing. Look, we're geotechs, right? We have to get dirty and look good. That's what a geotech does. And so it really comes down to hiring people that can go in the field, like I said, understand the site. So you really, we see a lot with other companies is they can do the report, they can assemble it, they can run through their processes, but they often miss the key issue of the project. Because they're all about assembly and process. They're not about understanding the site. And you really need people from the staff, but particularly the senior leadership, that really seeks to understand the key geotechnical and in-ground issues of the site. And you need to hire people that are passionate about that, right? We talk about passion and grit and being intrepid, being trusted, being reliable. After we wrote our sort of creed, it ended up being almost identical to what the Boy Scouts creed is. But, we're serious about that. You have to be gritty. You have to be intrepid. You have to be reliable. You have to be passionate about what you do, because if you're passionate, you'll seek to find the right answer, right? I mean, you've been through your career now from a young guy to a not so young guy anymore. And we talk about being a dynamic learner. I say don't hire smart people, and people think I'm crazy, but we don't want to hire smart people because they already know everything, or they think they do. We want to hire people that will seek the best answer and will, are passionate about finding the right answer, even though they don't know it when they're given the problem. And that makes a huge difference of having dynamic learners who are intrepid and passionate about, because nobody has all the answers, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the answer exists somewhere. Sometimes you have to kind of make it up or compete, piece it together as you go along, particularly on very technically complex projects. SoFi is one. We have $1 billion, bridge in the Port of Port of Long Beach called Gerald Desmond, which was, liquefaction and deep piles and all manner of problems. We have a subway in front of the La Brea tar pits, which you know where that is. And it's a 80-foot deep excavation in tar sand, which had never really been done before. So you have to think those problems through. I could show you a lot of pictures about what it looks like to go in 80-foot deep in tar sand. It's a mess. Oh. It's one of the versions of On Your Way to Hades, one of Dante's 9 levels.
Yeah.
But it is crazy down there. And so the question, you're a geotech, right? What are the geotechnical properties of tar and sand? There isn't a published book on that.
Yeah.
So the key thing is having people that are passionate about finding the right answer, even when the right answer is not obvious.
Got it. Wow. And in your opinion, what role does collaboration play when you think about your success, especially when you're managing these multi-billion-dollar infrastructure developments from a geotechnical standpoint?
I mean, it's everything, right? We talk about, one of our, 7 sort of descriptions of an ideal employee is being cooperative, which is why we don't hire smart people. They tend not to be cooperative. And smart means they already know the answers. Get out of my office, Jared. What are you asking me that question? You've worked with people like that, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't work. They're team destroyers. So everything's delivered as a team. People like to collaborate. They like this esprit de corps. People work harder for people they like to work with, right?
Yeah.
And they don't want to work hard for fill in the blank type of people.
Yeah.
I won't say it on this podcast, but if you and I were having a beer, fill in the word. And so cooperation is everything, because all problems are solved as a team. And you want to hire people that are, have ability and reliability and a cooperative, and all the things we just mentioned, because, it's hard enough delivering a normal project, a 3-story office building, right? I mean, with a client's demanding. Now scale that up to $1 billion or $2 billion or $5 billion project. It's all about building the right team that can work together.
Yeah. Excellent. So we've said billion a few times, right? We're like,
that's my favorite. My people are always like, you're always talking about, why don't you ever talk about the regular project? Look, when you sort of build a company, you're sort of like a father, right? You always brag about the A's your kids get. So that's one of my failings, is bragging about the $1 billion, projects we work at. We probably have 5 right now that are over $2 billion in value.
That's amazing.
So
talk about, let's see, key challenges that your team faced on one of these larger projects and how you overcame those challenges.
Yeah. I'll go back to what's called West Side Subway. This is a $2 billion tunnel and deep excavation for the stations. It's down Wilshire Boulevard, which I'm sure, very familiar with. And like I said, we were working on this deep excavation in front of the La Brea tar pits. And in this case, the owner, LA Metro, to their credit, had done a test shaft because they realized nobody had done one of these before. And, even after the end of this podcast or anybody watching it, you could go online and research the geotechnics of tar sand. You don't really get anything. You get some stuff from Canada because they mine it for oil, but you can drive a scraper through that. This stuff you can't even walk on it. So then the challenge became, what are the geotechnical properties of tar sand? So tar sand is thixotropic, meaning its properties change depending on how you strain it and stress it and heat it. There's parts of Wilshire Boulevard on hot days, the tar comes up through the street, and now you're going to do an 85-foot deep excavation in that. So how do you do that? There is no playbook. Again, LA Metro made an attempt, but They did a shaft, which was, say, 20 by 20, but the station is 800 feet long by 80 feet wide. So you're in a different class of, it's strutted excavation. You have to calculate the strut loads. We instrumented it. How much does it deflect? The ground doesn't deflect, it flows. So if you and I had a podcast on how do you do excavation in tar sand and what's the expected deflection, it's not clear, right? Yeah. I mean, you could research all day. And so, we finally came to a set of parameters. We had a lot of uncertain words in our geotech report. There was a lot of debate within the team when we talked about uncertainty and rough guess. And it turned out when we got to the bottom, you couldn't run it. I could show you pictures. We have a presentation on it. You couldn't stand in it, let alone run equipment in it. So how do you build, the station box, the invert slab is 5 foot thick concrete. The walls are 4 foot thick concrete. So would you build a station on that? It became a grand debate when we got to the bottom and eventually got done. And we worked with the owner, and the owner worked through the problems. That case was design build, with a major joint venture. And there was some tense meetings about it. But at the end of the day, it all got worked out. But, that little story I just summarized was a 5-year journey from the geotech report to, tunneling up to there, to making the excavation and shoring. And, oh, by the way, it's also high methane and some H2S. So none of the equipment the contractor could put in there could generate a spark. It was all special equipment. In tunneling terms, it's called a class 1, div 1, meaning it's a high gaseous environment. So incredibly challenging. That, station is now complete. That line is ready for service almost, but I think we started that project in 2015 and here we are in 2024. And so that's the other thing about the mega jobs, right? They go for 5 years, 10 years. So they take up a large part of your career for good or bad. I had one project that went for 20 years.
Wow.
And, that's one of the unique things, but people brag about it on their resumes, which is one of the things we want as a company, to have projects you can brag about, right? Which is not that easy in this career. Most projects are boring, right? I mean, they are. Jared, here, I got a 3-story office building. All right. I guess I'll do it. Have you done one before? I've done 1,000 before, but I'll do, but one of the most difficult things in a career as a younger engineer, is to work for a company that has interesting projects, right? Don't you think?
Yeah, I'd agree.
Because most projects are boring. They're repetitive, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, doing the same project, for the 10 years doesn't mean you have 10 years of experience.
Yeah, sure.
And so it's a real challenge as a younger engineer to work at a company that's interesting projects that you can really learn from. And, that's one of the things we strive for.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And we kind of hinted at this before, but the growth, right? And a number of companies are expanding through acquisition. So Group Delta has managed to remain independent. What are some of the advantages and that you're able to provide to your clients? And also, how have you remained independent so far?
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of calls, right? As a total side topic, if you want to just talk about acquisitions for a second, you want to just take a minute to talk about money.
Yeah.
So my people ask, so every year we do a yearly meeting, and then I ask them what topic. And 2 years ago, they want to talk about private equity. What is that? It's private money. Okay, that's obvious. So let me ask you a question. In private equity, they talk about something called assets under management, AUM, okay, which is the total of everything they own. What would you guess private equity is the total for private equity in AUM? Just give me a wild engineer's guess.
I've got no idea.
Okay. $11 trillion.
11 trillion. That's huge. Yeah. I would have said something trillions. That's huge.
Oh no, I'm the billion guy. Now we've just gone. Okay. Yeah. So they have a phrase called dry powder, which is unspent capital. Okay, it's part of They have $4 trillion in unspent capital, dry powder.
Yeah.
So people ask, why do I hear about private equity all the time? And now they're buying sports teams, right? They're buying hospitals, they're buying engineering companies. They have so much access to capital and they don't let it sit fallow. They're not allowed to. They have to mobilize it. It has to be spent. $4 trillion. Now they're not going to spend all $4 trillion on my company or your company as much as we would like for that to happen. But when they deploy capital, they do it in a big way and they know what they're doing. So, so much of what we've seen is private equity entering what was previously a boring space to them, which is civil engineering, or worse than civil, geotech, right? The housekeeping part of civil. Every time there's a mess, they're like, housekeeping, geotech. But that's why, because they can move billions of dollars at a time. And, we've seen that now with a year or two ago, AMEC was purchased, Golder was purchased, both by the same company. Other companies have bought a lot of smaller companies. So there's been this huge consolidation because they have a lot of capital to put to work, and that's what they're expert at. The advantage is we can still work fast. Simple things like understanding the contract, signing the contract, sending out an invoice, being more hands-on. Look, I'm the CEO. I'm 50% chargeable, both by my own mandate and by the need of the company. And because nobody ever gets in the business wanting to look at paperwork all day, right? We like getting dirty.
Yeah.
You do, right?
Yeah. Love it.
You want to get in the excavation of the tunnel, right?
Yeah. That's what we signed up.
So, it's what, right? I mean, you got a pair of dirty boots in your truck?
Yeah.
Me too.
And under the desk too.
And under the desk, and a dirty, I got a safety vest that has clay and tar on it.
There you go.
So it allows us to still be hands-on, do what we love, kind of be fast with the client because of our size.
Yeah.
It has its challenges because a big project does often dominate the company. And, it's the Jaws problem. It's like, careful the size of the shark you catch, right?
Yep.
Or the old man in the sea, right? You'll be stuck out with a marlin for 24 hours and come back with nothing. So,
yeah.
But sometimes you wish you needed a bigger boat. You're a 100-person company doing a $3 billion project. It's a challenge, but we love doing it. It makes us more malleable and responsive, we believe. And, that's just sort of the niche we've created for ourselves.
Excellent. Well, we're getting ready to take a break, but before we do, final piece of advice that you would give to geotechnical engineers that are aspiring to work on larger scale projects and aiming to lead a firm like you are. What advice would you give to those that are listening or watching?
Yeah, we touched on a little bit, find the right company. Mm-hmm. Find the right company. You could do a lot of different things that you're not going to be pigeonholed to running one computer program in one office on, whatever it is. I've interviewed people that have done slope stability for 8 years, and that sort of company. And so it's challenging now because there's so many have been acquired. They're part of a bigger structure. But, I know of firms that are still independent, technically challenged. Obviously, Group Delta here. There's firms like, say, Shannon and Wilson, our friend in Seattle, still relatively independent, bigger than us, work on challenging projects. Seek out a company that does great projects where you can learn all the levels of the business. The hardest thing is to work on interesting projects. Boring is easy. It's the repetitiveness of companies can be boring in projects. Find the right company that works on interesting projects that you can then get involved in all the levels. Not easy, but, look around.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that. We're going to come back in just a minute and close this one out, Mike, in our Career Factor Safety Insight. Stick around. All right, welcome back. It's time for our Career Factor Safety In segment. In geotechnical engineering, just like many disciplines of engineering, it's important to incorporate a factor of safety into your design. But what about incorporating a factor of safety into your actual career? Today, of course, we'll speak with Michael Reeder, CEO, Principal Geotechnical Engineer at Group Delta Consultants. Now, Mike, you've already had a very successful career. And when you look back on your career, what's something you've implemented in your career to give yourself, let's call it a factor of safety in your career?
Yeah, well, fantastic question, particularly for the younger listeners or engineers early in the career. And we touched on it a little bit. It's being technically versatile. It's understanding that markets change, residential is up and down, oil and gas is up and down. And so be able to do a lot of different things, be technically excellent in a lot of different things, not just the simple repetitive stuff. Because if you're at a company that's what we say is market focused, they do a lot of residential. And when that turns, all of a sudden, a lot of those folks were out of a job in 2008 or when oil and gas turned. So be a jack of all trades and you don't have to be an expert in all of them, but you have to be good in all of them. So if you have to go from working on an office building to a bridge, for example, you can do that because you've done footings, you can do piles, you can do liquefaction, depending on where the country you are. So be technically versatile in different kind of projects. And you could call that a survival skill, but that's what happens when markets change. We see this every 10 years. And is one coming? I mean, there's one going on now. The office market is like 2008. If your company did or does a lot of office buildings or commercial, it's a problem. And it's very similar to 2008 with residential. What is your next career move if all you've done is sort of office buildings, what that entails? So be technically versatile, work on a lot of different type of projects, and be able to do a lot of the different aspects of, in our case, the geotech business, and do them well. You don't have to be an expert, but be able to switch gears very quickly.
Excellent. Well, Mike, thank you so much for coming on, sharing all the great insights with us. You shared some great information and advice I know is going to be helpful for our listeners and those that are watching. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to find you? The email address you want to share, we'll put in the show notes, or are you on social media?
Yeah, I mean, I do have a TikTok channel where I do a lot of landslides are my thing. There's so many great videos of, landslides and earthquakes and stuff like that. There occasionally might be a granddaughter picture that pops up there. I have 11,000 followers there.
Okay.
I'm big on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's a really good way. We, try to brag about the company a lot. So I think my LinkedIn contact is on the podcast, and then Mike R at groupdelta.com. That's a tough one because you're probably in the same spot. So much what I get is sales and recruiting and, and so email is a way to avoid communication now in business. It's a pretty bad way to do it. The workaround is sometimes people send me a Teams request. And even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes, you're a young engineer, you want to hop on and do this, that's incredibly effective, even if it's 10 of you, right? And we can just mass communicate. But I mean, don't you think emails are a terrible way to communicate?
Yeah.
And because it's been abused so much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do the TikTok thing. It's Geo from Cali. I guess I think I might have provided that link, but
okay.
Earthquakes and landslides and stuff. But LinkedIn's an effective way. Teams requests are an effective way. Emails are, not what they used to be.
There you go. We'll get that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Mike. This is a lot of fun.
Sure. Thanks, Jared. I appreciate the request and talking about the business.
I hope you enjoyed the episode today. We would love to hear your feedback, comments, and our questions. Please feel free to go to geotechnicalengineeringpodcast.com, where you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in this episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, we wish you the very best in all of your geotechnical engineering endeavors. Peace.